Are you wanting to become a YouTuber for fun or for profit? Then check out the amazing Blue Yeti microphone today. Affiliate link in the video description. Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is the Mundane Matt channel, and oh my god, tomorrow, June 8th, 2017 is gonna be like the Super Bowl of fucking politics, at least this year. Or anytime leading up to the next presidential election. It's going to be pretty crazy. So James Comey, former FBI director, is going to be, basically testifying before Congress about whether or not Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, was essentially trying to coerce him into dropping the Michael Flynn investigation, as well as dropping the Russia investigation, and whether or not any of that factored in to Donald Trump firing Comey last month. Now, this has been a long time coming. I think we were always going to kind of get to this particular point when whether or not Comey was fired. Yes, he testified a couple months ago and basically said at that point there was no reason to assume that Trump was like trying to, to coerce him to do anything. There was no obstruction of justice. But it's entirely possible at that time period that he was still actively investigating the president, actively investigating the situation involving the campaign and its ties to Russia. And he didn't want to, tell people that he was working on this. It's kind of like, I'm still have cards close to my chest here. I'm not committing perjury, but I'm also not telling you anything that you aren't asking me directly or anything that's pertinent. He still had a job to do. And I think that's coming into play in a lot of this. But his opening statement has been released online, and a lot of people have been diving into it. There's been the left side of things that are like, proof of obstruction, lock him up, lock him up. And then you've got the right side of things that are just like, this totally vindicates Donald Trump. I mean, there's nothing to see here, folks. Like, it's so weird how both sides are looking at this. And here's the weirdest thing. Trump himself, man, this is where it gets really fucking crazy. Trump himself has decided that, well, first he was going to live tweet the hearing. He was going to live tweet it. And I thought that was great, right? I'm like, oh, cool. I can just watch the feed. I can watch his Twitter feed, and I can then kind of laugh hysterically. Or I thought about live streaming the whole thing, to be honest with you. Very meta, right? Very meta. Just discuss it and everything else. But the point is, that was what he had originally intended to do. That's not happening anymore. Now Trump is actually holding a speech, a rally, if you will, at the same time. And if that doesn't scream, I must deflect attention somehow, I don't know how else to do it besides going and speaking to my base, which will lavish me with praise and adoration, then I don't know what will. But that's the truth of it. That's the absolute truth of it right there, is the fact that Trump is doing this as a deflection, which does not does not look good for him. It's almost like when Comey was getting ready to testify, people were getting ready to ask, or were asking, is Trump going to invoke executive privilege, therefore blocking Comey from testifying? Trump isn't doing that. Instead, he is trying to deflect it on the national stage. ABC, CBS, NBC, all the major networks, not cable news, the networks, are going to be streaming this live, broadcasting this live across all channels. So no matter what Donald Trump does tomorrow, his rally will not be deflecting away from it. CNN won't cut in between both, right? MSNBC won't cut in between. Fox might do it. They might run Trump's speech instead of the hearings, which I think is doing a gigantic disservice to their particular base. Whether or not Comey has information on Trump that either vindicates him or essentially convicts him, this is something that should be watched by everybody. So what I wanted to do, because of the media spin, because of the political spin on both sides, I thought it'd be fun to go through the opening statement and just to see what Comey says. All right. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm very much anti-Trump, but I was also anti-Hillary. I'm very much a centered mindset person, and I want to see what he has to say. I want to see whether or not this vindicates Trump, or if this proves, or at least alludes that there was something that was done in the vein of obstruction of justice. So without further ado, let's jump into this motherfucker. Take a look. All right, so what we've got here is statement for the record, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, James B. Comey. That's a name that I think is going to go down in infamy. At least it's going to 100 years from now. People might know his name. All right, so it says here, Chairman Burr, Ranking Member Warner, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. I was asked to testify today to describe to you, my interactions with President-elect and President Trump on subjects that I understand are of interest to you. I have not included every detail from my conversations with the president, but to the best of my recollection, I've tried to include the information that might be relevant to the committee. All right, so details from that could, again, very similar to what I said from before. He was conducting an investigation into the president's campaign at the time. There might still be things that he is holding for more maybe of a classified or not public hearing in order to divulge that information, and that does happen. It says here, the January 6th briefing. I first met then President-elect Trump on Friday, January 6th in a conference room at Trump Tower in New York. I was there with other intelligence community leaders to brief him and his new national security team on the findings of an IC assessment concerning Russian efforts to interfere in the election. At the conclusion of that briefing, I remained alone with the president-elect to brief him on some personally sensitive aspects of information assembled during the assessment. Okay. The IC leadership thought it important for a variety of reasons to alert the incoming president to the existence of this material, even though it was salacious and unverified. I have a feeling that he's talking about the dossier, right? We all know the dossier. Among those reasons were, one, we knew the media was about to publicly report the material, and we believed the IC should not keep the knowledge of this material and its imminent release from the president-elect. And two, to the extent there was some effort to compromise an incoming president, we could blunt any such effort with a defensive briefing. So that's good. So they knew this dossier had been spread around Washington 4 months. It wasn't recent. It was 4 months. It had been out there. Not 4 months, but just 4 months. It had been out there for a while. And then they wanted to make sure that he was briefed of this to protect him, essentially. I look at this as they were trying to protect him. And that's not a bad thing. Comey, I think, was doing probably what, in his mind, the righteous and just thing, which is essentially what I get out of Comey most of the time. And pretty much anyone who talks about his character says very similar things. It says here that the director of national intelligence asked that I personally do this portion of the briefing because I was staying in my position and because the material implicated the FBI's counterintelligence responsibilities. We also agreed that I would do it alone to minimize potential embarrassment to the president-elect. Although we agreed that it made sense for me to do the briefing, the FBI's leadership and I were concerned that the briefing might create a situation where a new president came into an office uncertain about whether the FBI was conducting a counterintelligence investigation of his personal conduct. And that is going to be a tough one. It is a tough one. That's a very tough position that Comey found himself in. Regardless of what side of the political coin you find yourself on, that is a very tough position for Comey to be involved in. Because he is investigating the incoming president's campaign for any ties to Russia. There have been, 17 intelligence committees or intelligence agencies were saying that there were direct interference from Russia in a number of different ways. The term hack was thrown around constantly, even though the term hack isn't entirely legitimate. Interfere is more of the legitimate word. But then we just learned through the reality winners leak to The Intercept that there was actually some interference with voting machines. So again, we're learning things constantly, and this is from back in January when this stuff wasn't known yet. Or if it was known, it wasn't talked about publicly. So it goes on to say, it is important to understand that FBI counterintelligence investigations are different than the more commonly known criminal investigative work. The Bureau's goal in a counterintelligence investigation is to understand the technical and human methods that hostile foreign powers are using to influence the United States or to steal our secrets. The FBI uses the understanding to disrupt those efforts. Sometimes disruption takes form of alerting a person who is targeted for recruitment or influenced by the foreign power. Sometimes it involves hardening a computer system that is being attacked. Sometimes it involves turning the recruited person into a double agent, or publicly calling out the behavior with sanctions or expulsions of embassy-based intelligence officers. On occasion, criminal prosecution is used to disrupt intelligence activity. So from what I gather from that, the FBI takes this shit very seriously, but they also very much kind of weigh its threat level, if you will. So sometimes they warn somebody who might be targeted. Sometimes they turn a possible recruit into a double agent. Sometimes they warn a recruit. They're basically trying to do things, from what I can gather from this, without drawing much attention to it. Like, they want to be clandestine and covert and make sure that it's not being heavily pushed out there. And that's what I take, unless it's necessary to do so. They're not like going to run to the news with everything, because they know that the more they do that, then the less of an impact that it has the next time it happens. Because if they're out there screaming, Chicken Little, the sky is falling all the time, it's going to have problems. Okay, he goes on to say, because of the nature of the hostile foreign nations is well known, counterintelligence investigations tend to be centered on individuals the FBI suspects to be witting or unwitting agents of that foreign power. When the FBI develops a reason to believe an American has been targeted for recruitment by a foreign power or is covertly acting as an agent of the foreign power, the FBI will open an investigation on that American and use legal authorities to try and learn more about the nature of any relationship with the foreign power so it can be disrupted. And that's basically, from what I can gather from a lot of this stuff, is really where the majority of it was. It was just like, there was concerns, we saw some stuff about the campaign, we just opened an investigation into the campaign. And because it was the Trump campaign, Trump himself, and I do believe many of his supporters believe that was a direct investigation into Donald Trump himself. And I haven't personally seen anything that would warrant that just yet. Everything else seems to be like, you figure if Trump is the center, it's his circle of influence, his supporters, his advisors, that are the ones that are constantly being called called out for almost being compromised. Like Michael Flynn was absolutely compromised. And so a number of other things involving with that. So it goes on to say that in that context, prior to the January 6th meeting, I discussed with the FBI's leadership team whether I should be prepared to assure President-elect Trump that we were not investigating him personally. That was true. We did not have an open counterintelligence case on him. We agreed I should do so if circumstances warranted during our one-on-one meeting at Trump Tower based on President-elect Trump's reaction to the briefing. And without him directly asking the question, I offered that assurance. So Trump had said that Comey told him 3 times after Trump had asked that he wasn't under investigation. That was something from Trump's own mouth a while back. So here Comey's saying that back in January 6th, when he went to Trump Tower and he met with Donald Trump, he basically, through no certain terms, said, you're not the target here. Right? You're not the target here. But looking into the campaign, because Trump, come on. His biggest supporters have to realize he is extremely fragile when it comes to his ego. He's entirely narcissistic. And he very much pays attention to what people say about him. So he, looking at the investigation into the Trump campaign, he takes that as an investigation into him, even though Comey essentially is saying, no, you're fine. Yeah, we're not looking into you. You know, but the way Trump keeps kind of talking about it, it could lead someone to believe maybe he's hiding something. And I don't know if Comey thought that at all. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's what I'm taking from this. So, so it says here, okay, I felt compelled to document my first conversation with the president-elect in a memo to ensure accuracy. I began to type it on a laptop in an FBI vehicle outside Trump Tower the moment I walked out of the meeting, creating written records immediately after one-on-one conversations with Mr. Trump was my practice from that point forward. This has not been my practice in the past. I had spoken with President Obama twice in person and never on the phone, once in 2015 to discuss law enforcement policy issues, and the second time briefly for him to say goodbye in late 2016. In neither of those circumstances did I memorialize the discussions. I can recall 9 one-on-one conversations with Trump in the first 4 months, 3 in person and 6 on the phone. Because Obama was like pretty much hands off. Let the FBI do their thing. He's got other stuff he's worrying about. Trump has been like on Comey's nuts, right? Like, what, 3 in-person meetings and 6 on the phone meetings? Like, that is, you know, granted, the circumstances are totally different. I'm not going to deny that. They're totally different, but it feels like a bit like obsessive, you know, like that does feel a little bit obsessive. Like he is worried that they might find something, or he's worried that it might look like they found something, and he's maybe wanting to like keep tabs. And again, I understand that, but it very much sets this very weird precedent. Because it's unheard of. People, you know, there's policies in place to kind of, not policies, but maybe protocols in place to like not let this happen. Like Trump shouldn't be talking to Comey so often. He should be going through Jeff Sessions and the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, because Comey responds to them. It's almost like Trump is jumping over his Department of Justice to go right to Comey, and that might be something that, like, you know, the Department of Justice is not happy with. I mean, I just read a report today that Sessions himself, due to a lot of this kind of stuff, with him recusing himself over the Russia probe, has also threatened to quit, right? And that's causing lots of trouble. So we can see that, like, Trump is very much coming at this from like a business owner perspective. Like, I'm not going to go through the managers. I'm going to go right to the person himself and talk to that person, which isn't a bad thing to do. It just may not, in politics, it just looks a little odd. So the January 27th dinner, the president and I had dinner on Friday, January 27th at 6:30 p.m. in the green room at the White House. He called me at lunchtime that day and invited me to dinner that night, saying he was going to invite my whole family, but decided to just have it with me, with the whole family coming next time. It was unclear from the conversation who else would be at the dinner, although I assumed there would be others. It turned out it was just the two of us, seated at a small oval table in the center of the green room. 2 Navy stewards waited on us, only entering the room to service food and drinks. The president began asking me whether I wanted to stay on as FBI director, which I found strange because he'd already told me twice in earlier conversations that he hoped I would stay, and I had assured him that I intended to. He said that lots of people wanted my job, and given the abuse I had taken during the previous year, he would understand if I wanted to walk away. Which, that to me, like, I get kind of what he's saying, but it's also like, like, this is giving him an out. Right, it's a sly way of saying it. It's almost like negging him a little bit. It's like, well, yeah, you've had kind of a shitty year, you had kind of a shitty year. So if you want out, we understand. I don't mind if you want to leave. You people want your job. I could easily replace you, sort of thing. That's not instilling a lot of confidence in the FBI director, of which he had already previously asked if he would stay on and told him that he wasn't going to be fired, because Comey did say that about Trump a while back. He says, my instincts told me that the one-on-one setting and the pretense that this was our first discussion about my position meant the dinner was, at least in part, an effort to have me ask for my job and to create some kind of patronage relationship. That concerned me greatly, given the FBI's traditionally independent status in the executive branch, as it should. Because this comes across like Don Corleone calling in a lieutenant, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. You want your job. Like, that's kind of what it feels like. And I know Trump's not a mobster. He has ties to mobsters, but he's not a mobster. But that's kind of what it feels like. It's him trying to establish that dominance over Comey. Like you want your job, I can give you a job, but if you cross me, I'm gonna fucking bury you. Like, that's what it feels like. And I think even Comey is going like, that's kind of what it feels like. We're generally independent. The last boss was pretty much just hands off the entire time. You want this to be, you want power, and you want to exude that power over others. And that is, I think, what's happening here. He says, I replied that I love my work and I intended to stay and serve out my 10-year term as director. And then, because the setup made me uneasy, I added that I was not reliable in the way politicians like to use that word, but he could always count on me to tell the truth. I added that I was not on anybody's side politically and could not be counted on in the traditional political sense. Stance, as I said, in political sense, a stance I said was in his best interest as president, which is true. He wants as much of an unbiased third party as possible, because he can't sit there and go to the head of the FBI, who is conducting an investigation into his campaign for possible ties to Russia, and then be like, so I want to know you've got my back. Because that's not ethical in the fucking slightest. Like, nothing about that dinner was ethical, to be honest with you. So at one point, I explained why it was so important that the FBI and the Department of Justice be independent of the White House. I said it was a paradox. Throughout history, some of the presidents have decided that because problems come from justice, they should try to hold the department close. But blurring those boundaries ultimately makes the problems worse by undermining public trust in the institutions and their work, which is something Trump knows very well. Look at how much he's been attacking the media, trying very much to blur those lines and cause a distrust. Not saying the media is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It is not. It has a lot of work to do. But Trump calling everything that he doesn't like fake news very much muddies the water. And that is something that is not good when it comes to having a free and open press critiquing the president, because it then calls a lot of stuff into questions and everything else. The same concept is applying to this, which is one of the reasons why Comey felt that it was problematic to have this dinner, and at least what it kind of set up there. And he goes on to say, near the end of our dinner, the president returned the subject of my job, saying he was very glad I wanted to stay, adding he had heard great things, which is a typical Trumpism. I heard about it from Jem Mattis, Jeff Sessions, and many others. He then said, I need loyalty. And Comey replied, "You will always get honesty from me." Trump paused and then said, "That's what I want, honest loyalty." I paused and then said, "You will get that from me." As I wrote the memo I created immediately after the dinner, it is possible we understood the phrase honest loyalty differently, but I decided it wouldn't be productive to push it further. The term honest loyalty that had helped end a very awkward conversation, and my explanations had made clear what he should expect. Although with Donald Trump, you could explain to him what to expect, but if that's not what he wants, then he's not going to, settle for that. I think that's pretty much apparent at this point. During the dinner, the president returned to the salacious material I had briefed him about on January 6th, as he had done previously, expressed his disgust for the allegations and strongly denied them. He said he was considering ordering me to investigate the alleged incident to prove it didn't happen. I replied that he should give that careful thought because it might create a narrative that we were investigating him personally, which we weren't, and because it was very difficult to prove a negative, he said he would think about it and asked me to think about it. So Trump, I get it. Again, this is Trump's ego coming into play here. I did not have hookers pee on each other in a bed that Michelle Obama slept in. I want that squashed. And it probably wasn't even about the collusion with Russia. I'm pretty sure it was the P tape, right? I'm pretty sure that was the P tape. And so, but Comey is warning him, like, look, you want this to go away. I get it. Ordering me to do this may not be in your best, the best course of action is the best way to describe it. Like, because then it could create this narrative that you are asking us to look into this and shut it down. And that could be obstruction of justice if there ever was a problem, right? Well, he goes on to say here that it was, as was my practice for the conversations with President Trump, I wrote the detailed memo about the dinner immediately afterward and shared it with the senior leadership team of the FBI. So at least he didn't hold on to this shit. He wrote down the memo and shared it with this team, which is establishing a paper trail, and it's establishing a legitimacy of the memo itself. Therefore, if it came up later on, there would be witnesses to say, yes, we saw this at this time, we read it at this time, at this date, we knew he was there, this much is true, and they'll be able to go from there. Now let's go into the February 14th Oval Office meeting. This is a long freaking opening. It's going to be a good testimony. On February 14th, I went to the Oval Office for a scheduled counterterrorism briefing with the president. He sat behind the desk, and a group of us sat in a semicircle of about 6 chairs facing him on the other side of the desk. The Vice President, Deputy Director of the CIA, Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Secretary of Homeland Security, and Attorney General, and I were all in the semicircle of chairs. I was directly facing the President, sitting between the Deputy CIA Director and the Deputy of the NCTC. There were quite a few others in the room, sitting behind us in couches and chairs. It was a full room, full house. The president signaled the end of the briefing by thanking the group and telling them that he wanted to speak to me alone. I stayed in my chair. As the participants started to leave the Oval Office, Attorney General lingered by my chair, but the president thanked him and said he would speak only with me. The last person to leave was Jared Kushner, who also stood by my chair and exchanged pleasantries with me. The president then excused him, saying he wanted to speak with me. When the door by the grandfather clock closed, we were alone. The president began by saying, I want to talk about Mike Flynn. Flynn had resigned the previous day. The president began by saying Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in speaking with the Russians and that he had let him go because he had misled the vice president. He added he had other concerns about Flynn, which he did not then specify. The president then made a long series of comments about the problem of leaked classified information, a concern I shared and still share. After he had spoken for a few minutes about leaks, Reince Priebus leaned in through the door by the grandfather clock, and I could see a group of people waiting behind him. The president waved at him to close the door, saying he would be done shortly. The door closed. So at this point, you can tell that, because this is, again, it's kind of unprecedented, right? You kick everyone else out of the room, the director of the CIA, director of the NCTC, the attorney general, chief of staff, senior advisor. They're all out of the room, and it's just Comey and it's Trump. They're all waiting out there in that waiting room, probably going, what the fuck are they talking about? Because it's almost unheard of. But again, Trump is unconventional, so, that's how I take it. Then he goes on to say, the president had returned to the topic of Mike Flynn, saying he is a good guy and he's been through a lot. He repeated that Flynn hadn't done anything wrong on his calls with the Russians, but had misled the vice president. He then said, I hope you can see your way clear of letting this go. He is he's a good guy. I hope you can let this go. I replied only that he is a good guy. In fact, I had positive experience dealing with Mike Flynn when he was a colleague as a director of Defense Intelligence Agency at the beginning of my term at the FBI. I did not say I would let this go. The president returned briefly to the problem of the leaks. I then got up and left out the door by the grandfather clock, making my way through the large group of people waiting there, including Mr. Priebus and the vice president. So everyone is still outside of this room, right? Showing you how important this moment is. This is important. That February 14th meeting is important because everyone is out there going, what in the shit is he doing? You know, they want to make sure he's in the night going to say anything that's going to get his ass in trouble. And he might have done that, depending on who you talk to. So I immediately prepared an unclassified memo of the conversation about Flynn and discussed the matter with the FBI senior leadership. I had understood the president to be requesting that we drop any investigation of Flynn in connection with false statements about his conversations with the Russian ambassador in December. I did not understand the president to be talking about the broader investigation into Russia or possible links to his campaign. I could be wrong, but I took him to be focusing on what had just happened with Flynn's departure and the controversy around his account of his phone calls. Regardless, it was very concerning given the FBI's role as an independent investigative agency. And it's true. It's very true that this is something that Trump should not have done. And it probably was directly referencing Flynn. This was a first firing. We're talking like less than a month, 3 weeks basically since he took office. And this is the first firing of a major member, staff member of the administration. So this is not something that is going to be like just kind of like washed away or something under the rug. People are going to be talking, and Trump probably trying to, let's say, deflect from further criticism or deflect from further problems, just wanted this all to go away. It's like Flynn is gone. The problem's gone. Don't look at this anymore. Let's move forward. That's my take from it. But the way he went about it does kind of come across very much as like, I'm telling, was this Trump, like the private citizen asking or Trump, the president asking? And while the two are definitely not this, they're no longer separate. They are, there is no Trump private citizen until he's out of office. So you've got like, but I don't think Trump at that point, 3 weeks into it, understands that his words hold some serious weight. And even now, almost 6 months in, he still doesn't understand that. So the FBI leadership team agreed with me that it was important to not infect the investigative team with the president's request, which we did not intend to abide. We also concluded, given that it was a one-on-one conversation, there was nothing available to corroborate my account. We concluded it made little sense to report it to Attorney General Sessions, who we expected would likely recuse himself from involvement in Russia-related investigations. He did so 2 weeks later. The Deputy Attorney General's role was then filled by an acting capacity by a United States Attorney who would also not be long for the role. After discussing the matter, we decided to keep it very closely held, resolving to figure out what to do with it down the road as our investigation progressed. The investigation moved ahead at full speed, with none of the investigative team members or the Department of Justice lawyers supporting them aware of the president's request. Okay. Shortly after, I spoke with Attorney General Sessions in person to pass along the president's concern about the leaks. I took the opportunity to implore the Attorney General to prevent any further direct communication between the president and me. I told the AG from what had just happened. Him being asked to leave while the FBI director who reports to the AG remained behind was inappropriate and should never happen. He did not reply. For the reasons discussed above, I did not mention that the president had broached the FBI's potential investigation into General Flynn. To be fair, he should have. I understand why he didn't. This is a breach of protocol. It's inappropriate. It should not have happened. And the AG should be aware of this. Now, granted, the AG, and this might be what Comey's thinking, the AG is in Trump's pocket. The AG is very much in Trump's pocket, and he is going to do, what Trump wants, because he was like the first senator to jump on board to back Donald Trump, has been a supporter ever since, even though now, months after this particular, memo was written and these comments were made, Sessions and Trump are rocky, and Sessions probably won't make it till the end of the year. We know that like the likelihood of Sessions using this as a way to kind of like curtail Trump or bring him in probably would not have happened. Given the fact that the administration was still brand new, there's lots of trouble, there's lots of problems with the Russia probe, so they probably didn't want to deal with that. And that's something that's character of AG, in my opinion. That's character flaw of Attorney General Sessions. Comey would have done it, but Jeff Sessions was probably like, I don't want to piss off the boss. I just got this job, and he's just going to kind of like sweep it away. And I think Comey knew that, which is why he didn't tell Sessions about Trump's request. He, again, keeping the cards close to his chest for when he needed to play them, which I do believe is probably now. So the March 30th phone call. On the morning of March 30th, the president called me at the FBI. He described the Russia investigation as a cloud that was impairing his ability to act on behalf of the country. He said he had nothing to do with Russia and had not been involved with hookers in Russia. That's going to be said on national TV. That's awesome. And had always assumed that he was being recorded when he was in Russia. He asked what we could do to lift the cloud. I responded that we were investigating the matter as quickly as we could and that there would be a great benefit if we didn't find anything to have our having done the work well. He agreed, but then reemphasized the problems that it was causing him. And this, again, we're starting to see it now as we go through. And I don't think it's unfair to make that claim about Trump. Trump is feeling the pressure from this. I mean, clearly feeling the pressure from this. It's every question he gets. We'll deal with this shit. He's probably just tired. He's like, I didn't do anything. No hookers peed on me, peed on a bed, peed on themselves. It never happened. And I am tired of this because it's been a lot of fodder for late night comedians, especially around that time. And even months later, still now, they bring that up as a quick jab to throw at Trump. And I'm sure he probably was feeling sensitive to it. And I don't blame him at all. I don't blame him at all for being sensitive to false accusations. But again, he's treating this like he's running a business, not running the country, and it's inappropriate. And then the president then asked why there had been a congressional hearing about Russia the previous week, which I had, as the Department of Justice directed, confirmed the investigation into possible coordination between Russia and the Trump campaign. I explained the demands from the leadership of both parties in Congress for more information, and that Senator Grassley had even held up the confirmation of Deputy Attorney General until we briefed him in detail on the investigation. I explained that we briefed the leadership of Congress on exactly which individuals we were investigating, and that we had told those congressional leaders that we were not personally investigating Donald Trump. I reminded him that I had previously told him that. He repeatedly told me we need to get that fact out. I did not tell the president that the FBI and the Department of Justice had been reluctant to make public statements, that we did not want to have an open case on President Trump for a number of reasons, most importantly because it would create a duty to correct should that change. And again, it's not playing your cards before you have to. It's yes, them not saying that they weren't investigating him was probably damaging Trump's ego a little bit. And again, I understand that empathetically. I understand that. But you have a situation here too where they're trying to do their job to the best of their ability, and him getting antsy about it is not going to help. Because Trump is not used to waiting on certain things. I'm sure Trump is like, I bark, they jump, whatever, or whatever, and then he's not getting that here, so he's definitely worried. The president went on to say that there was some satellite associates of his who did something wrong. Oh, that if there were some satellite associates of him who did something wrong, it would be good to find out, but he hadn't done anything wrong, and hoped I would find a way to get that out if we weren't investigating him. Trump has already kind of tossed some people under the bus past this too in some certain situations. So you can see that he's basically saying, like, if they've done anything wrong, you need to tell me, and I will just toss them in front of that trash compactor and we will be good to go, because he wants this thing done and over with. In an abrupt shift, he turned the conversation to FBI Director Andrew McCabe, saying he hadn't brought up the McCabe thing because I said McCabe was honorable, although McAuliffe was close to the Clintons and had given him, I think he meant Deputy Director McCabe's wife, campaign money. Although I didn't understand why the president was bringing this up, I repeated that Mr. McCabe was an honorable person. He finished by stressing the cloud that was interfering with his ability to make deals for the country, and said he hoped I could find a way to get out that he wasn't being investigated. I told him I would see what we could do, and that we would do our investigative work well and as quickly as we could. Again, Comey just wants to wrap this thing up too, but they still have to go through all the proper investigations. Now, one of the biggest problem here is when you've got the people, especially the right-leaning pundits, that are like, well, they haven't found it. It's been months. They haven't found nothing. Yeah, they haven't found nothing. And there's a lot of that chest thumping that's been happening. Investigations take time. They do. They take time. You'll hear about investigations into drug trafficking rings that take years to go through the process of. and to get the evidence needed to either expose it or realize that it's all sham and walk away from it. These things take time. They don't happen in a bubble. They don't happen in a vacuum, and they sure as fuck don't happen overnight. And that's one of the biggest problems that Trump has been really not getting in this situation, is like he wants it over with. His base wants it over with, and as a result, it's a lot of anxiousness and a lot of anxiety surrounding it. And I'm sure that Trump's anxiety, which is entirely 100% warranted, okay, I'm not faulting the dude at all for that, is starting to kind of like show up in certain ways that is not helpful to the cause. You know what I mean? And so immediately after the conversation, I called Acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Boente. AG Sessions by then had recused himself on all Russia-related matters to report the substance of the call from the president, and I said I would await his guidance. I did not hear back from him before the president called me again 2 weeks later, so the April 11th phone call. On the morning of April 11th, the president called me and asked what I had done about his request that I get out, that he's not personally under investigation. I replied that I had passed his request to the Acting Deputy Attorney General, but I had not heard back. He replied that the cloud was getting in his way of his ability to do his job. He said that perhaps he would have his people reach out to the Acting Deputy Attorney General. I said that was the way his request should be handled. I said the White House counsel should contact the leadership of the DOJ to make the request, which was the traditional channel. Again, Comey is trying to push the traditional side of things. Like, don't call me. We'll call the AG, and the AG will call you. We'll set it up that way, okay? There's a custody chain here of information, and we have to make sure it's there for protocol's sake. Finally, he says he would do that, and he added, because I've been very loyal to you, very loyal, we had that thing, you know. I did not reply or ask him what he meant by that thing. I said only the way to handle it was to have the White House counsel call the Acting Deputy Attorney General. He said that was what he would do, and the call ended. That was the last time I spoke with President Trump. So, holy crap. That was a long one, too. I didn't realize it was that long. I read it earlier, and it was like, didn't feel that long. So what we have here is you've got the left that are saying it proves that there was obstruction. I'm going to agree more with the right side here and say that I don't think there was obstruction. I don't view it as obstruction, not to the obstruction to the point of what they want. I view it as more of this is them very much. This is not them. This is Trump very much trying to end this thing. But he's starting to be pushy about it. Now, to some people, I could see him asking at the end there, saying like, how do we get out of this? You need to end this, can you end this investigation, so on and so forth. I can see them arguing for obstruction, and in some respects, it might be considered as such. My view on it is it's not being done from a malicious state. It's being done not because he's trying to cover up evidence or he's trying to cover up anything that he had done that was horrible, but that is just, to him, it's ruining his ability to govern. It's ruining his ability to make deals. It's ruining his ability to do his job. And in that sense, I actually feel sympathy for Donald Trump. But then again, this is a position that requires the utmost confidence, the utmost respect of the job, and also traditions and protocols set before it. Trump is, yes, he's he is very much an impromptu person. He's unconventional, is the word I want to use. And by that point, he definitely is going to do things his own way. But this is where it's causing him problems, because everyone else isn't on the same page as him, and they can't be expected to play his game without knowing the rules. And since he just kind of does whatever he wants, this is what's causing him frustration, and this is what's biting him square in the butt. And that is, I think, the truth of it. I think that's the utter truth of it. This probably won't do anything to quell the complaints of the left that Russia was involved. This won't do anything to quell the complaints from the right that the Democrats are just obsessed with it. This is just going to be another situation where people are going to look at what Comey has to say, at least in this statement, and determine that Trump is more he's more upset at how it's impacting his image in essence than it is for actually trying to get to the bottom of this investigation. I don't think Trump cares. To be honest with you, I don't think Trump cares if anyone of his team was involved with Russia. Because if it doesn't come back to him, if it doesn't impact him personally, then he doesn't give a shit. And that's pretty abundantly clear from these notes. And that doesn't make him like a criminal. It doesn't make him a good person either, but it doesn't make him a criminal. and not enough that would call for impeachment proceedings, and not enough to call for anything else they want to do. So the way I see it is, looking at this, unless the Q&A after this gives us more information, or Comey's got a bombshell that he's holding on to, I don't think there's anything to worry about. But Trump going out there and holding that speech during this thing, it's the exact same behavior we've seen Comey demonstrate here. Ego is fragile as fuck, and he needs to not be around that. It's one of the reasons why I do not think Trump is qualified to be president. He doesn't have the temperament for it. And we've seen that time and time again. You can like the guy cool, you can not like the guy cool, but based on what we've seen here, based on his own actions, based on how he's trying to deflect from people watching this thing tomorrow, or at least deflect his base from watching this thing tomorrow, shows you that he does not have the capabilities and the maturity to lead the country. And I think, while I don't think he's done anything criminally wrong here, I do stand by the Rolling Stone article from yesterday that he should probably resign. Yeah, that gets us Pence and Paul Ryan. But maybe that's better than what we have. Maybe that's better than what we currently have. Because those guys are at least lawful evil, or lawful neutral. You know, I wouldn't say lawful good, but they're definitely more lawful than chaotic. And what we need is more lawful and less chaotic. But I want to know your guys' thoughts. If you've made it to the end of this probably nearly 40-minute long video that I did not realize was going to take this long, leave your comments below. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This is the Mundane Matt channel. I will talk to you guys later. Have yourself a fantastic day. And hope you guys watch the streams tomorrow. I know I will. Peace out, everyone.